Guys, I'm having a bit of a problem right now. I'm currently having a bit of trouble making videos for my YouTube channel because, to be really honest, I just want to play Deadlock all day. And it's really starting to affect my ability to just sit down and make a bunch of videos and upload them on YouTube. Even as I'm writing this, at least the intro, I'm still playing the game. I'm just in a really long queue at 5 a.m. on EU servers. Now I know that sounds a little bit like a cry for help, but don't worry, it really isn't. It's actually been a really long time that I felt this way about a game, and I want to keep this magic for as long as possible. You know, with YouTube being my job and all.
Little kid lover. That way people will know exactly where my priorities are at.
It's safe to say that I've amassed quite a bunch of hours in a lot of different games. And in the past few years, none of them have really grabbed me like Deadlock has. It's more just been routine to me. Like, yeah, this game's kind of nice, I guess, or nah, that's not for me. But nothing's really pulled me in ever since maybe early Destiny. That's a long time ago. With Deadlock though, it is different. And the best part is that even though it's early, it is already big enough for me to reliably get some views on YouTube, at least enough to pay for my groceries, at least enough to survive. And this way I can finally, unapologetically, grind this game for 10 hours a day and tell myself that it is good for business. And that is all that I've been doing lately.
Have you been playing since morning, bro?
Yeah, you too though, right? I recognize you.
No, I couldn't. After that game, I wanted to kill myself, so I couldn't.
Oh, right. No, I've been playing non-stop, dude. Non-stop.
Yeah, that's crazy. Fuck my life.
Now, the purpose of today's video is that I just wanted to go over the why. Why Deadlock? Because on the surface, yeah, it's a new game, it's a new type of experience, but is it really that new or that special or that different from what's already out there? I mean, we've seen 12 hero shooters come and go laughably fast.
Me and my crew.
And in terms of just MOBA mechanics, Deadlock doesn't do that much different from the rest out there. The game is still in closed alpha, there's not much to really grind for, there's no progression system, ranked is just now coming out. And yeah, if you look at player-based numbers, we are indeed also seeing a bit of a drop-off, which I don't think is anything to worry about, but it does show that over time, without progression, player retention will dip a bit. Not for me though. I'm still playing this game every single day, and so I wanted to see why that might be, how I feel about it after 700 hours, does it still hold up, and also we'll try to answer the question if this is actually going to be the next big thing like some people have been saying. Now I can't look into the future, but I've got a couple things that I really want to look at that might give you a better idea, so let's try and just answer this question together. So first up, there is not a single game that will appeal to everybody. No game is made for everyone, and a game that is made for everyone is going to appeal to no one. Is something that I've heard people say over and over if they want to sound smart or something. So let me give you a bit of an insight as to why Deadlock appeals to me so much specifically. And then from there we can look at how this might also appeal to a wider audience. And part of this I already mentioned in my beginner's guide for Deadlock that I released, I don't know, a couple weeks ago now, maybe over a month ago. Time really flies. But to me, Deadlock feels like a perfect mix between two of my most played games, which is Here They Come, The Division, and Heroes of the Storm. I know that that's quite a thing to say out loud nowadays, but no, I'm not ashamed of it, and neither am I making these comparisons simply because these two games are third-person shooters, and these two games are MOBAs. There's a bit more going on here. You know, on the Division side, it's not just the camera angle, it's not just the way that we move around the map, it's not just the verticality or the fact that both games take place in New York City. It is also very much how we build our characters. Weapon damage, vitality, and spirit power is essentially firearms, stamina, and electronics. And many of the weapon stat boosts and the damage mitigation types and the ability scaling, it all works in a very similar way. And that was definitely one of the main reasons why the item shop came so natural to me when I just started playing, and why it still feels rather basic today, even though I know a lot of people that are struggling with it a bit. Looking at the UI, there's even the stuff like health bars or shields being displayed right next to the player, or the important stuff like ammo count and stamina dashes being displayed right next to your reticle. And this next thing might be a bit of a stretch, but there's also the fact that the gameplay loop in the Dark Zone, in the Division, was to farm landmarks to get gear to then fight players, right? And that isn't all that different from farming minions and neutral camps to then get items to then go and fight players. It is just that in Deadlock, everybody starts from 0 every single game, and within 30 to 40 minutes, everybody has all their stuff. Then, if we compare it to Heroes of the Storm, everybody's least favorite MOBA experience, there's one thing that game did pretty well, and that is to put the focus on bigger team fights rather than just laning for 20 minutes at a time. Not only was the XP shared, so you didn't have to worry too much if you missed a wave, if your teammate could just get it for you, but the maps, as in multiple maps in Heroes of the Storm, also all had different type of objectives that forced players to fight each other. It was a bit more fast-paced, it resulted in a lot of exciting moments, but of course at the cost of simplifying the MOBA experience drastically. Now Deadlock, I think, has hit a good middle ground, where there is an item shop, there is individual XP, or souls as we have it in the game, but it still very much focuses on those fights, on fighting other players. There's objectives like the urn, the mid boss is just a single boss instead of having 2 bosses, which really promotes fighting each other for that boss around the boss instead of just trading bosses, and the laning phase also doesn't take as long in Deadlock. Guardians, I'd say, even with the new patch, are relatively easy to take down, easier than taking a tier 1 tower in League for example, and the troopers, the little minions, actually changed the way they give out souls after the 8-minute mark now. So after 8 minutes, you basically don't want to have more than one person in the lane, because then you're not getting as much souls. So yes, the best of both worlds really. We have the depth that comes with the character builds, but also the exciting moments because of all the objectives on the map, and because of how fluid and dynamic the laning phase can really be. So yeah, take a lot of the good stuff from The Division and a lot of the good stuff from Heroes of the Storm, mash them together and then build off of it to create something that is even better than the sum of those two. You can see why I have felt that this game was almost tailor-made for me now. It speaks to everything that I've loved about video games in the past 10 years. And this is, I think, why, even though the game has practically no content, it's got one game mode and that's it, I've still managed to rack up those 700 hours, and I'm still learning new things almost every single day that I play. So now you see where I'm coming from, and why I suddenly made the channel change to basically make Deadlock guides away from retrospectives. It's just because I believe in this game so much. But that still doesn't really answer the question now, does it? If this game is actually going to be the next big thing or not. Just because I like something that much, that doesn't mean that it will really have that big mass appeal as well. But I've been sitting on this for a while. I've been giving it a lot of thought. And aside from all the stuff that I just mentioned, I think there are a few big things, let's call them problems, that you typically find in these type of games that Deadlock has seemingly solved almost completely. And I think that this is what's going to allow it to gather that mass appeal. So let's just go down the list, starting with the removal of hard character roles. You see, whether it's League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm, Overwatch, even Valorant to some degree, any game where players typically have to work together in a somewhat competitive setting, the one thing that you'll almost always see is character roles. The easiest label that we often put on these are damage dealers, tanks, and healers. And the problem with these roles is that far more players always want to play the damage roles rather than any of the supporting roles, like the tanks or healers. This doesn't much apply to me because I'm an absolute psychopath that loves the main tank in almost any game that I play, as I get far more satisfaction out of denying someone else's combos or power spikes or, general fun than trying to pull them off myself. But this is a real thing. Half of the time that I end up in a draft with random teammates, no matter what game I play, everybody always insta-locks or highlights the flashy, more sexy DPS characters. And whoever was just a bit too busy finishing the YouTube video on the second monitor, they're now getting shafted. They're going to have to play healer or tank. With Deadlock though, I wouldn't say that none of this applies. Players still really like to play Raid or Haze, the typical damage dealers. And there are definitely characters that are more tanky or that work better as support characters, but true roles aren't really a thing. And thanks to the item shop, you can almost build every character as a damage dealer if you wanted to, or as a pseudo support or as a pseudo tank. There are of course always going to be characters that, thanks to their kit, are going to be a bit better at any of these roles. You know, Kelvin or Ivy, for example, they fit the support role a bit more because they have healing built into their kit. And Dynamo or Abrams fit the label of a tank a bit more thanks to their strong ability to engage. But that isn't to say that you couldn't build any of these characters like DPS characters. And in fact, Kelvin just received a bunch of nerfs to his gun because everybody was using him as a damage dealer and that was considered really strong. Ivy just received a bunch of nerfs to her grenades because players started playing her like a mage and that was considered too strong. Dynamo is notorious for having one of the strongest guns in the game early game. And Abrams, well, everybody just loves to hate on Abrams, especially Metro.
It's fucking MarcoStyle on fucking... It's fucking MarcoStyle on fucking Abrams, man.
A few moments later.
Jesus fucking Christ, it's 1 HP, you don't chase an AFK. You're actually terrible. You are actually terrible at the video game. Uninstall.
You're 1-7!
I'm 1-7. I'm the only person trying to do anything, you fucking dumbass!
I'm sorry. The joke is getting old now. This happens every time I'm in a game with him, man. Now, there is a good reason as to why the rules are so loose, so to speak. And you might even be inclined to believe that this is just because the game is in a very early state and we really haven't figured stuff out yet, which is partly true. I mean, Mage Ivy did not exist 3 weeks ago, and then 1 week ago it was deemed too strong and it got nerfed. But the other side of that though is that true tanks or true supports simply wouldn't work that well in this game either. The biggest difference between Deadlock and Heroes of the Storm, for example, is that when it comes to playing tank, you can't really do your job as well in Deadlock because the game takes place in a 3-dimensional space rather than on a 2D plane. I mean, how are you really going to zone or peel? How are you really going to be body blocking characters? This is essentially a MOBA where for the first time ever having a larger character model doesn't really come with any advantages. You can be as fat as you want, but are you really going to prevent a Yamato or a Pocket from going into your backline and messing up your team? I mean, you could, but it's a lot more difficult to do than in a game like League of Legends. Most of the time, the fights in this game are so messy that there isn't even a proper front to back. It is just everybody is trying to run away and get to everybody else. That's not to say that tank characters are impossible to make work in a 3D space. Overwatch is a good example of a game that has tanks and healers in a 3D space, but Overwatch also doesn't have waves to manage or camps to clear. And it does have a front of the fight and a back of the fight thanks to the main objective, the payload, where everybody sort of hovers around. So the tank characters and the healers, they can actually get value out of their kits because all of the DPS players stay close to them at all times. At least that is how I think it works because I also haven't actually ever played Overwatch. So yeah, if I get some things wrong, do point it out. Everybody that I've ever talked to always told me to stay away from Overwatch, so I've never actually given it a go myself. But yeah, for all of these reasons, the fact that Deadlock has a laning phase, that it's a 3-dimensional space what we're playing in instead of just a 2D plane, that makes it harder to make true roles work the same way as it would in a traditional MOBA. And to be completely fair, I think that every character in Deadlock right now almost has their own unique role and playstyle that isn't easily transferred to any of the other characters in the game or to more traditional roles. I mean, just think about that for a bit. When it comes to tanks, I again just feel that Abrams is the one true tank in this game, with lots of HP and the ability to really lock down players on the other team. You can argue, well, Mo and Krill is tankier on paper, but he somehow still feels easier to kill and is more like a roaming gank character than anything else. Bebop would be classified as a tank character in other MOBAs, but this is also a tank that can't really peel much and late game has a very hit or miss engage. Warden feels more like a backline bully than someone who can truly be at the center of a fight. Lash can be considered somewhat of a tank, but I feel like he's also too squishy to be put into that category. He's a very mobile type of character that gets his engage, gets his combo, and then goes away for a little bit until he has his cooldowns back. You see where I'm going with this, right? As far as a true tank character for a true tank enjoyer like myself, there isn't really an alternative to Abrams yet, and this goes for a lot of the cast. Now, part of this is again because the game is very early. There's about 20 characters right now, I think. So if any of them would feel too similar to each other, then that would not necessarily be a good thing. But my point is that true roles are not a thing in Deadlock. Every character has their own unique playstyle as of now, and the fact that all of them can be damage dealers to some degree, all of them can do the jungle, all of them can take support items, all of them can become quite tanky if you really build into it. That is going to solve one of the biggest issues that these type of games usually have, which is that a lot of players just don't want to play half of the cast of characters because they're not labeled as DPS characters. Now, the second thing that I think Deadlock has done very right, and that sets it apart from all the other MOBAs out there, is how there is a seemingly limitless ceiling to the efficiency of which you can do things. And that is almost all thanks to its incredible movement system. In other MOBAs, anytime you have to move around the map to do anything other than laning, the biggest factor that determines how you get across the map is simply your movement speed. If your character has a high movement speed, you move around the map faster. If he has a low movement speed, you move around the map slower. Now, some characters of course have movement abilities built into their kit, or maybe they've bought special items, but typically you don't want to be using these important cooldowns out of fights. And while surely you can optimize your padding in these type of games, you can be slightly faster if you really know where you're going in the jungle, it is nothing compared to the stuff that you can do with movement in Deadlock. Even after 700 hours, I still feel like my movement is improving every single day, as I keep discovering new ways to get across the map one way or another, either by watching other players do it or just by pure chance. And the way that I rotate around the map in the mid game is so different now from the way that I did during launch. And that was when I already had 400 hours played, mind you. And what this really means is that even when I'm not fighting other players, even when I'm doing stuff that is typically considered pretty boring in MOBAs, I'm still more engaged than that I should be, because I'm constantly figuring out how to get from point A to point B in the absolute fastest way, in the way that consumes the least amount of stamina, or the most if I don't really have to care about stamina at the moment, or I'm trying to figure out how to get from point A to B in the way that will make it most difficult for my opponents to chase me down. Knowing how to move around the map and all the little tricks that you can do completely transforms the experience. And you might hear that and then tell me that it sounds like that I've never played a movement shooter before, and that I'm now just discovering that there are more ways to move around in video games than clicking with my mouse. But what it comes down to, again, is that this is a MOBA game, where unlike in your movement shooters, there is a real, tangible reward attached to being faster, which is souls, of course. Because the faster you can get around the map, the faster you can take waves, the faster you can take camps, the faster you can take objectives, and perhaps even secure some kills. And so if you look at it this way, the better your movement gets in Deadlock, the more souls you'll be able to collect, and the more items you'll be able to buy, which then allows you to do extra damage earlier in the game. A real, tangible reward for simply practicing the movement system. Now, the last big thing that I think Deadlock is going for itself that will give it a good chance to stick around in the long run is that on top of this being a highly competitive game, it absolutely also has that goofiness factor that makes it enjoyable as a more casual experience too. Whether it is rolling around on a ball with magic carpet, knocking people out of the air, whether it's using rescue beam in, let's say, creative ways, whether it's fights just turning into absolute clown fiestas, even when you're trying your hardest to win games, every now and then stuff just happens that will make you laugh out loud.
I cannot hear you, Marco.
Oh my
Your mic is like not picking that up.
Oh my god. That was too funny. That was actually way too funny. Now, of course, I can't pretend that I haven't gotten salty after a painful loss or that I've been frustrated with some of the bugs in this game.
Anyone want to swap?
Yeah, I can swap.
Давай, давай, братиша, давай.
Давай, иди, блядь. Мусор ебаный, взятку бери.
Да, иди нахуй тогда, понял?
Давай,
Сиди,
давай,
блядь,
мне
соси
похуй.
хуй,
Все,
долбоёб.
все втроем стоим,
Не,
поебать.
да поебать мне.
Wait, is
Ты думаешь, мне не
he...
похуй? Ты думаешь, мне не
I'm
похуй?
alone
Все,
now.
ГГ проебали.
Wait, aren't we swapping? Can one of you guys go green?
Слэмпи ебаный, блядь. Иди нахуй до 4 узником, будь дальше как
Oh
был.
my
Нахуй
God.
ты в эту
4
игру
узник,
заходишь,
сука.
долбоёб.
Ебаный долбоеб, ты вообще кто нахуй? Я тебя знать не знаю. Ты кто, Васька?
Ну зато, блядь, о тебе слава ебаная обходит.
Ну ты, блядь,
опережает
просто
тебя.
ебаный лошара солевой, тебя нахуй знать никто не знает, блядь, твоего никнейма. Первый раз видят, блядь, в этой жизни.
Так я тебя тоже,
Закрой
братишка,
ебало, нахуй,
первый
дура
раз вижу.
ебаная.
Я тебя нахуй ни
Oh
разу в
my
ранге
god,
не
can they
видел.
shut the fuck
Мне
up?
просто говорят,
They're
что ты
speaking in
солевая.
code,
Ты
Danny.
понимаешь, что
Okay,
никто не
I
знает,
need-
кроме
Давай,
твоей
ну, иди,
матери.
долбоёб.
Закрой рот, тебя кроме твоей матери
not
никто не
your
знает,
shit.
сын ебаной шлюхи. Я срался на
I'll offer
могилу
you
твоей
servers.
матери, ей.
But there also hasn't been a day that went by that I haven't had genuine joy with this game or just bursted out in laughing because of something that happened, and this is an often overlooked but key component of any game. It just has that X factor to it. It reminds me a lot of Bungie's Halo 3 actually when that came out. The game was competitive, but it was also just fun and wonky in many different ways. You wanted to grind to true skill 50, but at the same time you had people dying to cone physics or whatever. And part of this is also because it's an early alpha, some of this stuff will get fixed. But just some of the interactions that I've had with players in this game, even in a full competitive environment, people are often just goofing around, because it is just fun to do so in this game. And that to me is a very good sign. Now, I'm not going to make this video longer than that it already is, but putting all of these things together, I really do believe that Deadlock has a good chance to be successful in the long run. I do think it's gonna dip a little bit before we get to that point though. Again, I'd like to point out that we only have one game mode on one map with 0 proper progression systems. I know players usually like a lot of skins, we don't have that yet. And we have 0 user-generated content too, which I'm sure is also gonna become a thing once this game releases fully. It's very bare bones right now, which makes sense. So for that reason, I think the game will dip off slowly but significantly until we get to that full release. But I think that after that, when all of those systems are put in place, that this game is going to stick around for the long run. But hey, maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm just coping too much because I'm really enjoying this game. It would not be the first time that I truly put all of my eggs in one basket, that I truly believe in something, and then it ends up not doing so well in the long run. You let me know what you think. You gotten a bit bored already with just the one map or the unranked game modes? Or do you still not have access yet? I know people usually tell you to comment at the end of the video. It's good for engagement, that's for sure. But I'm actually curious to see if the sentiment is still the same around Deadlock as it was 2 months ago. But yeah, that was it for today. I said I'd be back soon with a jungle guide, but I think I'm gonna just skip that one because I don't think it's that interesting. What I really want to show you is my updated Abrams guide first. Yes, another Abrams guide. We're just gonna do these every other month to keep this thing updated. So expect that as the next video. Thank you all so much for watching, guys, and you will see me very soon. GG's, well played everybody.
Just go back to division, bruh.
Fuck.